Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Motion in Motion. In today's episode, we're going to talk a bit about dates. So we're going to do two things. First off, I'm going to show you how I'm going to use MHPrettyDate, which is a really nice cocoa pod for dealing with relative dates, to update our Tasker application. And then we're just going to talk a bit about dates in general on iOS. So let's start off. In this episode and in future episodes from now on, unless I get feedback to suggest otherwise, I'm going to be using Vim. It was a bit weird for me to be using Sublime. Vim's my main editor. But if if there's a sort of consensus of Vim is a bit too hard for you guys to follow along with, just let me know and I'll change back to Sublime. So let's get started. I'll open up Vim. And the first thing we're going to do is open up our rake file and add the pod. So I'll open up my rake file. And we're going to add the MHPrettyDate pod. And then run pod install. So the next thing we have to do is in our duet label, we're getting the string passed along for our text from our controller. So we're kind of not doing the right thing there, where we're generating that string, which is sort of what the view cares about, in the controller. So we're actually going to go back to our controller and remove all of that and just pass in our date directly. So we'll open up our task list controller and we'll go to our cell for row at index path method. And you can see that we've got the NSDate formatter creating that string for us. But we just want to pass our date in directly. So we'll delete those lines and just pass in the date directly as duet. And now we're using this in another place. So this is a chance for some cleanup as well that we might do in another episode. I might cover refactoring in a future episode. But for now, we've also got this used in another place, which is in our height for row at index path. So once again, we'll just delete these and do duet. And so now we're passing our dates in directly to our duet label and into the view hierarchy. So let's head back to our duet label. And we can use now this duet part of our data with MHPrettyDate. So we'll use MHPrettyDate's PrettyDate from date method. So we can pass in our duet date. And then with format. And we're going to use the MHPrettyDate format with time. So there's a bunch of different formats that you can use with MHPrettyDate that sort of show different relative times. Each of them do sort of all the common ones that you might see in interfaces. So it's a really, really good pod to be using if you have any sort of date displays in your app. But for now, let's run this and check out what it's done. And you can see now that we've got these pretty dates. So it says yesterday at 6:30 p.m., 9 a.m. for today at 9 a.m., and tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. So there's some really good dates in here, and it's a lot nicer way to display these dates. Now, there's two other changes that I want to make. So the first one is that I want to show things that are past due as red and I want to just have due at the beginning of each of those labels. So we'll head back into our duet, and the first thing we can do is we can add the due to our label, and next we're going to use some of the checking that MHPrettyDate gives us. So we can actually do MHPrettyDate.isPastTime to check if the date time is a time in the past. So if we do MHPrettyDate is past time and pass in our duet date, and then for the in here we can then just set our text color to be UI_color.red color, and in the other case we want to set our color back to the normal dark gray. So we'll delete that and put it in here. And so when it's a future time, that way it'll set the date to be, the text color to be the light gray. And it'll do this on the first configure as well, so that way by default it's always going to be that light gray. So let's run this again. And you can see this is now looking so much better. It gives a lot quicker sort of feedback on, all right, well, what's overdue and when are things actually due. So MHPrettyDate allowed us to do that really, really quickly. It also comes with a bunch of other stuff as well, so I highly suggest checking it out. So now I would want to do a bit of a demo of using NSCalendar and NSDateComponents along with time or NSDate, NSDate being the foundation class and time being our Ruby Motion version. So I've got a lot of examples in here, and I'm just going to walk through each of them one by one, and then we'll run it all. So the basic part is using NSCalendar. So you can use NSCalendar.currentCalendar to get the calendar, the system's calendar. This helps with localization and things like that. So if we want to check what kind of calendar there is, we can use the calendar identifier. If we want to check what time zone, we can check the time zone that's on the calendar. We can also, now this is a bit sort of more verbose than what you might be used to if you've been doing Rails apps or anything like that. But this is the way of using a calendar to get parts of a calendar out that are localized and things like that. So this is getting the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, and the second out. So the first thing we need to do is use our calendar to get all of the components. So that's an NSDateComponents class. And fill it up with the components that we need, the calendar units that we need. So here we're grabbing the NS year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, and the second, and passing it the date time.now. And then we can just output them. So NSDateComponents, which is the class that got returned from that, has year, month, day, hour, minute, and second on it. And so, but there's a bunch of other components that we can use as well that are pretty helpful for some situations. So we can also grab out these units as well. So there's the week, the weekday, the ordinal weekday, the quarter, which is the quarter of the year, the week of the month, and the week of the year, as well as the error. So I can't imagine many points where you need the error, but it's in there. And once again, we can just use methods on NSDateComponents, which gets returned for week, weekday, weekday ordinal, quarter, week of month, week of year, and error. And so the last little example we're going to look at is actually adding components onto a date. So let's say we want to find a time that's 10 years, 1 month, and 5 days from now. Because I know you look for that exact date all of the time. And we can create an NSDateComponents. And then we can set the year, the month, and the day on that. And then using the calendar, we can create a new date using those components, and it will add on each of those components to the date that we pass along, and that options bit at the end is almost always 0. And then we're just going to output the time now and the future time, so I'll show you what that all looks like. So if we actually run this, you can see that I had some testing that I was doing before. So we've got our little banner. What type of calendar? Gregorian. What time zone? Australia/Sydney, because I'm in Sydney. The year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, and the second. The week, weekday, weekday ordinal, quarter, which is 0 for some reason. I'm not exactly sure if that's based off something odd there. But week of month, week of year, and error. And we also have that bit where we added 10 years, 1 month, and 5 days. So we've got today's 2014, the 12th of the 4th, 2014, and it's displaying the 17th of the 5th, 2024. So these are just some handy little classes that you can use when you're doing date calculation. And it's really important to use NSCalendar on iOS and just in your applications in general for having properly localized dates. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you liked what you got today. It's a bit shorter than the last episode, which went for 60 minutes, so try to keep it sort of a bit more timely this time. And please let me know if you found me using Vim a bit too distracting, or if there was any feedback about how things were today, just with the small changes. And yeah, I will hopefully see you in the next episode.